You ever wonder how some people slip through the cracks? How monsters don't always wear masks or lurk in the shadows, but walk among us like nothing's wrong? It's the quiet ones, the ones nobody suspects. That's where the real danger lives. This isn't just another crime story. It's a glimpse into a mind twisted by pain, cruelty, and darkness so deep it's hard to believe it came from someone you might have passed on the street. This is the story of Gerald Patrick Lewis. Born in Jacksonville, Florida in 1965, Lewis came from a middle-class background. His mother worked as a draftswoman. His father was a computer technician. This was not a story of hardship or deprivation. Yet, from an early age, disturbing behaviors began to surface. By the time he was a child, Lewis was already showing signs of cruelty. He would cover dogs' heads with milk jugs, causing them to panic and run into traffic. At the age of 4, he burned himself with matches, and rather than turning away from danger, he became fascinated with fire, setting blazes in basements and lighting cardboard walls just to watch them burn. Something inside him had fractured. His family life deteriorated further. His parents separated, and Lewis discovered that the man he called father was not his biological parent. From there, his life spiraled. He became involved in petty crime, burglaries, drug use, and eventually homelessness. By 16, he was robbing strangers to survive, dropping out of school in the 9th grade. Amid this chaos, he found a semblance of normalcy. A girlfriend named Lena. She was 16, he was 20. They worked together at a KFC in Brockton, Massachusetts. Young and hopeful, Lena believed in him, despite the warnings from her family. That hope nearly cost her everything. Lewis was arrested on serious assault charges. While out on bail, he began stalking Lena's home, watching from the shadows, waiting. When she cut off contact and refused to let him near their child, the violence escalated. His first victim was not Lena, but a woman who resembled her. He picked her up by the roadside, and what followed was horrific. Over 30 stab wounds, a brutal attack, and her body discarded in a remote wooded area. This was only the beginning. Over the next decade, Lewis embarked on a killing spree across Massachusetts, Georgia, and Alabama. His victims were vulnerable women, many struggling with addiction, homelessness, or other hardships. People society overlooked, and that invisibility allowed him to evade capture for years. Yet, Lewis was meticulous. He kept trophies, small reminders of his crimes. Scrunchies, cash, mementos, physical evidence of his dark deeds, tucked away like trophies in his mind and home. The turning point came in 1998, in a modest, rundown motel in Mobile, Alabama, the Twilight Motel. It was there that the trail finally caught up with him, and his decade of terror came to an end. Or so they thought. Because what happened that night wasn't just the end of a spree. It was the moment everything exploded. April 1998, Mobile, Alabama. This wasn't some glamorous place. The Twilight Motel was a rundown, grimy joint, part motel, part bar, part trap. Women stood outside like they were waiting tables, not customers. The kind of place where trouble was always just around the corner, and safety was a luxury no one could afford. That night, Gerald Lewis rolled in, driving his beat-up red pickup, already drunk, looking for something, anything, to fill the emptiness. The parking lot was quiet. No women waiting, no easy answers. He pulled up outside the bar, cracked open another beer, and settled in. A man wrestling with his own demons, drowning in loneliness and anger. Then she appeared. Kathleen Bracken, 32 years old, brown hair, a Massachusetts accent, and a toughness that spoke of a hard life lived on the edge. She noticed him sitting there and asked, "You looking for something?" He answered plainly, "Yeah, you." She took him back to her room, demanded $100. Gerald refused. She kicked him out with a curse. That should have been the end of it. But it wasn't. He drove around, searching for someone else, but came back. This time, there was another woman, heavier, sitting outside. She told him Kathleen was busy, but offered to hang out in his truck. Gerald let her, but he wasn't interested. He said she smelled strange. So he sat restless and brooding, eyes fixed on Kathleen's door. Then a customer left her room. Kathleen stepped into the doorway, naked, unashamed. She laughed, calling him out right there in front of the other woman. Something inside Gerald snapped. He went inside. He tried to negotiate the price down to $50. She refused. When he pushed, she slapped him, even bit his finger. That was the breaking point. Gerald's rage exploded. He grabbed her by the neck, choking her until he heard it crack. When she lost consciousness, he threw her on the bed. What happened next is too brutal to fully describe. It was an act of cruelty and violation so vile, it chills the soul. When she began to regain consciousness, he strangled her again, pressed his full weight down on her until she was silent. Then, without hesitation, he pulled a knife. Over and over, he stabbed her in the chest. She died looking up at him, eyes open, lifeless. But Gerald didn't stop. He cut her skin, shallow slices, almost like an experiment, as if he were trying to understand something only he could comprehend. Then, as if the nightmare wasn't enough, someone knocked at the door. Panic set in. He hadn't planned for company. There was no time to hide the body. And the parking lot was filled with people drinking and talking. Too risky. So what did he do? He grabbed a six-pack of beer, the used condom, the $100 bill left on the floor, and walked out. He left her naked, dead, and spread across the bed, like she was never even human to him. And what did Gerald do next? He cracked open another beer, because one body wasn't enough. After killing Kathleen Bracken and walking out of the Twilight Motel like nothing ever happened, Gerald Patrick Lewis wasn't finished. He drove around that night carrying the weight of murder like it was nothing more than a cigarette in his pocket. No remorse, no fear, just hunger. Hunger for more. He pulled up at the Crest Motel, just a short drive away. Another dark corner of the city, another row of rooms with flickering lights and broken souls lingering by the doors. That's where he met Lisa. She was young, blonde, small. Another street girl trying to survive a world that chews women like her up and forgets their names the next day. To Lisa, Gerald was just another trick, quick money, a ride, maybe a fix. He told her he'd pay if she could get him some cocaine. She agreed, but instead of a motel, he took her somewhere else, to his mother's house. That's right, the same man who had just taken a life, hours earlier, snuck a prostitute into the home he shared with his mom. They used his bedroom. And by the next morning, Easter Sunday, his mother left for church like nothing was out of place. But Gerald? He loaded Lisa into his red pickup and headed into the woods. And by now, we all know what that usually meant. But something was different this time. Maybe it was her hair, too light. Maybe she didn't remind him of Lena, the girl who started all of this. Or maybe even a killer has a moment of hesitation. Maybe the ghost of Kathleen was still too fresh in his mind. Whatever the reason, he let Lisa go. He drove her back alive. And that single act, that flicker of restraint, would be the thread that unraveled everything. Because Lisa talked. She told someone about the trip, about the woods, about the strange man with the red pickup truck who took her to a house across the bay, a place near a lake, something or other. Meanwhile, back at the Twilight Motel, Kathleen's body had been found. A woman with outstanding warrants had walked into the room, seen the horror, and didn't call the police. Not right away. Not until the next day. But now, authorities had a dead woman, a red pickup truck, and a name. 3 days later, police pulled up to a small house in Daphne, Alabama. Gerald opened the door himself. He didn't run. At the station, He didn't ask for a lawyer, didn't even try to lie. He just started talking, like someone cracking open a book they'd been waiting years to share. He told them about Kathleen, about Misty McGugan, a woman he killed months earlier and dumped in the woods off County Road 66, wrapped in a tarp. Police found her right where he said she'd be. He'd kept her scrunchy, tucked away like a souvenir. But it didn't stop there. He kept going. "You know what?" he said. "I killed more. A lot more. Georgia, Massachusetts, Alabama. A decade of death, spoken like casual memory. One victim was 8 months pregnant. Another was stabbed up to 40 times. His first kill, the one by the gravel pit, wasn't an accident. It was a pattern forming long before anyone noticed. As his words spilled out, cold cases started heating up. Detectives pulled old reports, ran DNA, matched timelines. And everywhere they looked, Gerald Patrick Lewis was already there. But the question still hung in the air. "Why confess?" He told reporters plainly, "I got nothing to hide. I'm already in big trouble." Said it felt good to talk, that he'd been carrying this for years. And that's what hits hardest. This man, this monster, lived like a shadow, taking lives, hiding in plain sight, sleeping in his mother's house while mothers across 3 states cried into the void, wondering what happened to their daughters. But the darkest truth? It's the women he targeted. Sex workers, addicts, women of color, women who didn't have people with power looking for them. Women the system failed to protect. And Gerald knew that. He used it. He counted on it. But now, with bodies turning up and confessions flowing, the system couldn't look away anymore. The question wasn't whether he'd go down. It was how. And the answer, fast. Gerald Patrick Lewis was in cuffs, and the moment he opened his mouth, the floodgates broke. 7 murders across 3 states. And he acted like he was giving an interview, not a confession. Sitting in Mobile County Jail with his feet up, talking to reporters like he was promoting a documentary. Cool, calm, empty. He didn't cry. He didn't hide. He just laid it all out. Like evil was casual. He even said, straight-faced, "I don't want to spend life in here. I want to die. I'd rather lose in court." As if death was a form of control. Like choosing the way out makes him powerful. But let's be clear, Gerald wasn't some misunderstood soul. He wasn't haunted. He was hollow. He'd stopped running not because he found peace, but because he finally ran out of places to hide. Then came the sentencing. Georgia went first. Death penalty for the murder of Peggy Lynn Grimes, the pregnant woman he left tangled in the kudzu. Alabama followed. Misty McGugan, Kathleen Bracken, 2 more names, 2 more death sentences, 2 states, 2 death rows, and even that wasn't enough for him to shut up. Sitting on death row, Gerald tried to negotiate murder. "I got more bodies," he said, "but I want a TV, I want to smoke, I want my own cell." Like he was bargaining over cable plans, not lives. They gave him nothing. And yet, he kept talking. Out of pride, boredom, guilt, maybe all 3. He told them about his trophy room, an attic in his mother's house, filled with souvenirs from the dead. Hair ties, bits of jewelry, trinkets no one would miss, except the ones who loved the women he stole them from. And in prison, they gave him a nickname, Twilight, mocking him for the motel where it all unraveled. But there was no twisted glory waiting for Gerald, no final stage, no big moment. On July 25th, 2009, Gerald Patrick Lewis died quietly in prison. No witnesses, no goodbyes, no last words, just gone. And maybe that's how it should be, because this ain't a story about some mastermind serial killer. Gerald wasn't brilliant. He wasn't a ghost. He was a predator, a coward who chose victims the world already ignored. Women like Misty, Kathleen, Peggy, Angela, Lena, and so many others whose names we'll never know. That's the real story. not the man, but the women, the lives he ended, the ones we failed to protect. And here's the part that refuses to be forgotten. Gerald Patrick Lewis wasn't just some dark chapter in crime history. He was a warning. Because almost every woman he targeted had one thing in common. They were living in the margins, poor, addicted, working the streets, black, brown, pregnant, unseen. He didn't stumble into victims. He chose them because he knew no one else was looking. And that's the real evil here. It's not just the monster. It's the system that let him move like one. We talk about cracks, like they're flaws in the pavement. But for people like Gerald, cracks are shelter, cracks are camouflage, cracks are where monsters live. So when you hear stories like this, don't just say, "Damn, that's wild." Ask, why was he allowed to go that far? Why were they forgotten? And who's still slipping through the cracks right now? Because everyone deserves to be seen, to be safe, to be missed when they're gone. You've been watching Room 17, where real stories get told and forgotten voices are brought back into the light. We don't chase monsters for entertainment. We tell the truth, raw, respectful, and real. If that's the kind of story that matters to you, make sure to subscribe, turn on notifications, and share this with someone who needs to hear it.